Come join us as we pull back the curtain on something truly wild happening right now. We've been digging through, well, a fascinating stack of information, and honestly, what we found is pretty mind-boggling.
It really is.
We're talking about a major country facing this huge demographic challenge, and the policies they're putting in place. So unique, so bold. They're definitely raising eyebrows, sparking some intense debate globally. So today, our deep dive is taking us right into that intricate world of global population trends. We're really zeroing in on the extraordinary, sometimes controversial steps one particular nation is taking, trying to reverse its falling birth rate.
And we've synthesized quite a collection of insights here. What emerges isn't just, a local issue for one country. It's actually reflecting a critical global challenge. We see variations of this everywhere.
Okay.
Our main focus will be on Russia today, looking closely at how they're grappling with their numbers. But then, importantly, we'll zoom out and see how their approach stacks up against what other countries are trying.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission here is to really get the why.
Yeah.
Why these drastic measures? What do they actually look like on the ground? And maybe most importantly, what could the ripple effects be for societies everywhere?
Right.
You're going to hear about some surprising financial incentives, pretty radical cultural shifts, and even these weird echoes from history shaping policies today. It's kind of a journey into how nations are literally trying to engineer their future populations.
It really is like demographic engineering in action.
So as we started digging, one policy just jumped right out. It seems to be right at the heart of Russia's new demographic strategy. This thing launched back in March 2025. And honestly, it feels like something out of speculative fiction, but it's real.
It does have that quality, doesn't it?
In 10 specific regions across Russia, there's this initiative, schoolgirls. Okay, schoolgirls are reportedly being offered quite a bit of money, over 100,000 rubles, which is what, about 900 pounds?
Roughly, yeah.
Just for giving birth and raising babies. Now, okay, Russia has had policies before, giving money to adult women for having kids. That's not totally new.
Right, the maternity capital and things like that.
Exactly. But extending this direct payment to schoolgirls, that's the part that's so striking and frankly, pretty astonishing.
Yeah, what's really insightful there is just the sheer directness of it. It practically screams urgent response, a response to a very, very real demographic crisis. We looked at the numbers. Russia's birth rate in 2023, just 1.41. Now, you compare that to the replacement rate, the number you need just to keep the population stable, not shrinking.
Which is about what,
Around 2.05 births per woman. So 1.41 is... oh, it's a deep red flag. It signals a rapidly shrinking future generation.
And digging into the context, the sort of why now makes that urgency even clearer, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Russia's population has actually been sliding downward since the 1990s. The long-term thing, this demographic winter.
Right. Decades in the making.
But recently, the conflict in Ukraine has just poured gasoline on the fire. You see these estimates, maybe 250,000 soldiers killed. That's a devastating loss of young men.
A huge demographic hit right there.
And on top of that, you've got this brain drain. A significant number of educated young men, professionals, they've just left the country, which erodes the workforce even more.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, it paints a really challenging economic and, frankly, national security scenario. A shrinking workforce, an aging population that puts immense strain on the economy, on pensions, healthcare, social services. Everything. And ultimately, on national power, on capabilities. We've seen President Putin himself talk about this repeatedly, prioritizing population growth, directly linking it to national survival, national security. He did this in his 2024 state address.
So it's framed as existential.
Very much so. It's not just about, economic indicators. It's being presented as crucial for the nation's future. And that level of concern, well, it leads to these extraordinary, almost desperate feeling measures.
Okay, so when a government floats something like paying schoolgirls to have babies,
yeah,
you can bet it doesn't land quietly.
No, definitely not.
Our dive into the public reaction within Russia showed it's, deeply controversial. It's sparking some very real ethical debates, even among Russians themselves.
Right.
We found this survey from the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, and the opinion was almost perfectly split. You had 43% approving of the policy, which is quite a chunk.
Significant, yeah.
But a very close 40% were against it. So it's clearly not some universally popular idea, which tells you right away, there are serious ethical concerns being weighed up,
Hmm.
especially, the whole idea of encouraging teenage pregnancies.
And that really brings up a crucial point about their strategy. It's not just about these cash payments, is it?
No, it seems much bigger.
Exactly. What we observed is a much broader, really integrated approach. They're trying to influence demographics from almost every angle, touching nearly every part of society.
Okay, like what else?
Well, consider these other things we found. You start to see this pattern emerge. First, there's a 2024 law effectively banning what they call child-free propaganda.
Propaganda. Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just frowning upon it, it imposes actual fines, pretty hefty ones, up to 5 million rubles, for publicly promoting a child-free lifestyle, or even just discussing it as a valid positive choice.
So it limits discussion around family planning.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It narrows the scope of acceptable public discourse. Then second, we've seen significant abortion restrictions rolling out since 2023.
How so?
Things like regional bans on private clinics performing abortions and tighter controls on selling abortion medications, so direct limits on reproductive choices.
Okay.
Third, there's this noticeable push, both from the government and culturally, emphasizing family over career for women. It comes through in policies and media narratives, subtly and sometimes not so subtly encouraging traditional gender roles. Motherhood is the primary contribution.
Right, reinforcing certain expectations.
Precisely. And fourth, this one is really remarkable. They revived the old Stalin-era Mother Heroine Award in 2022.
Mother Heroine Award.
Yeah.
From Stalin's time.
The very same one. It's given to women who have 10 or more children, and it comes with a big cash payment, 1 million rubles. But it's more than just money.
It's symbolic.
Hugely symbolic. It
Yeah.
explicitly connects having a large family to patriotism, to national duty. It deliberately harks back to that earlier period of intense state efforts to boost the population.
Wow. So when you put all that together, the payments, the propaganda law, the abortion limits, the cultural push, this historical award,
Yeah.
it really feels like this comprehensive strategy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cultural, legal, financial, historical,
Yeah.
all pushing towards one single goal. Get those birth rates up drastically.
It's like the entire state apparatus is trying to reshape family life and reproductive decisions.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. While Russia's tactics, especially paying schoolgirls, might seem extreme, the underlying problem, that falling birth rate,
It's far from unique.
it's everywhere, isn't it? This demographic puzzle, it's playing out globally. It's a challenge most of the world is sharing right now.
Absolutely. Our analysis confirms that. Declining fertility rates are a huge global concern. We looked at projections from The Lancet, for example. They suggest that by 2050, over 3/4 of countries,
That's 5%.
over 75%, will likely have fertility rates below their replacement level, meaning their populations will be set to shrink without immigration.
Wow. And what's driving that globally?
Oh, it's a complex mix. Things like increased urbanization, much better access to education for women, which often delays childbirth. The rising cost of raising children is a big one.
Right.
And also changing societal values, different ideas about ideal family size, more focus on individual careers and aspirations. It's not confined to one type of economy or political system. It's widespread.
Okay, so if almost everyone is facing this, you have to wonder, how are other countries trying to fix it? Presumably with less extreme measures than Russia.
Well, we see a real spectrum of responses. They reflect different cultures, different economic situations. Broadly, you could say they fall into two camps: trying to encourage more births internally or looking outwards to immigration.
Okay, give us some examples.
All right, take Hungary. They've been pretty aggressive with financial incentives, offering big tax breaks, subsidized mortgages, but specifically targeting families with 3 or more children.
So aimed at larger families.
Exactly. A direct attempt to boost birth rates by making bigger families more affordable. Then you have Poland. Since 2016, they've had their 500-plus program that gives about 101 plun a month per child.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it became universal in 2019. It definitely helps families financially. But the studies suggest its actual impact on increasing the birth rate has been somewhat limited, especially among higher income women, which suggests, money isn't always the silver bullet.
Right. Other factors matter. What about the U.S.?
Even in the U.S., where the fertility rate was down to 1.6 in 2023, well below replacement, you hear proposals. Donald Trump floated the idea of a $5,000 baby bonus for new mothers.
Well, go.
And interestingly, that idea got public support from someone like Elon Musk, who talks a lot about population collapse being a risk to civilization.
So mostly financial incentives in those cases. What about the other approach? Immigration.
Right. Look at Spain. They're facing a seriously aging population and they need workers.
Oh.
So their strategy is different. They're making it easier for migrants to gain citizenship.
Oh.
They have this plan, starting May 2025, to grant residency to about 300,000 people annually for 3 years. The explicit goal isn't boosting births, it's expanding their workforce by bringing people in.
So, very different tactics for the same underlying pressure.
Exactly. It really highlights how varied the challenge is and the different philosophies nations adopt. Some focus inward using financial carrots, sometimes social sticks to encourage births. Others look outward, seeing immigration as a pragmatic solution to keep the population and economy going. It's a whole range of interventions.
So, looking at all these different approaches, but especially coming back to Russia's, it makes you ask the big questions, doesn't it? Are these policies actually effective in the long run?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, really.
And maybe even more importantly, what are the ethical implications when the state gets this involved in something so personal like family size and reproduction?
Yeah, the effectiveness question is tricky. What we generally see from demographic studies, from looking at past examples, is that while you might get a short-term bump in birth rates with direct cash payments,
Temporary boost.
possibly. But the long-term impact on things like overall social welfare, gender equality, sustainable economic growth, that's heavily debated. Many demographers are quite skeptical. They argue these policies often fail to address the root causes of why people are having fewer children in the first place.
Which are?
Well, things like the lack of affordable, high-quality childcare, the difficulty of balancing work and family life, economic insecurity, the sheer cost of raising kids over 18-plus years, and critically, genuine gender equity.
How does gender equity play in?
Because if policies don't actually empower women, if they don't support women having both careers and families, they often fall short. Sustainable population growth seems linked to societies where women have real choices and support. Simply paying for births can end up being a very expensive and ultimately ineffective band-aid if those deeper issues aren't tackled.
Right. And that brings us back to the ethics, especially around Russia's strategy. Targeting schoolgirls. That raises huge red flags for many people.
Absolutely. The discussion there gets very pointed. Critics see it as potentially exploitative. Targeting a vulnerable group, possibly prioritizing raw birth numbers over the education, the development, the autonomy of these young women.
It feels like it devalues their future beyond just having babies.
That's the argument. It raises fundamental questions about bodily autonomy, about the state's role in profoundly personal decisions. There's concern about potential coercion, especially among poorer communities, and the risk of trapping young mothers in cycles of poverty or limiting their life chances.
But presumably there's another side to that argument within Russia.
Well, yes, proponents, or those defending the policy, would likely frame it as a necessary evil in the face of a genuine national crisis, an existential threat. They might make a kind of utilitarian argument that the collective good, ensuring the nation's future population, has to take precedence over some individual concerns in such dire circumstances.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, essentially.
That kind of logic, yes, it becomes this incredibly complex balancing act. National imperatives versus individual rights. And different societies, different political systems draw that line in vastly different places.
It really paints this picture of a global challenge, doesn't it? Where nations are basically running these huge, complex experiments, trying out solutions that are sometimes controversial, often weighing national survival against core human values.
That's a good way to put it. Demographic experimentation on a grand scale.
So where does all this leave us? Thinking about our deep dive into Russia's policies and this wider global picture, it feels like it really highlights something fundamental about the pressures shaping our world.
I think so, too. We've definitely seen that falling birth rates aren't just, abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. They cut right to the heart of national identity, economic futures, the very social fabric.
Yeah.
And Russia's strategy, it really stands out. That unique mix of aggressive cash incentives, legal clamps on personal choice, the cultural messaging. It's a particularly bold and, as we've seen, intensely debated response.
And you've heard how different countries are all wrestling with the same basic question. How do we secure a thriving population for the future? The answers range wildly, don't they? From those comprehensive tax breaks in Hungary, the baby bonuses discussed in the U.S., Poland's child benefits, to Spain easing immigration, and yes, even Russia's direct payments to schoolgirls. The toolkit being used is incredibly diverse.
And perhaps the deeper lesson in all this is about that intricate balance needed for any solution to be truly sustainable. You have to navigate the needs of the nation, its future well-being, its prosperity,
Right.
while also absolutely respecting individual rights, individual choices, bodily autonomy. It's this constant tension, and every nation is grappling with it, trying to find its footing.
Which leaves us and you with a pretty provocative thought to chew on, I think. As governments all over the world seem to be intervening more and more directly in what feel like deeply personal choices about family, about having children, what are the long-term ripple effects going to be?
Yeah, beyond just the birth numbers.
Exactly. How will these policies actually shape the societies of the future? The values, the opportunities, the relationships. What does it truly mean for a society when the state tries so directly, so forcefully to sculpt its own demographic destiny?
A huge question.
It is. We really encourage you to keep exploring these fascinating issues, keep questioning the easy answers, and keep diving deep into the knowledge that shapes our world.